I always knew I wasn't their favorite. It's not like they ever said it out loud, but I could feel it in the way their eyes softened when they looked at my brother, Aaron, while mine only reflected disappointment. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was just there. I remember being 10 years old, standing at the kitchen counter with my report card in hand. Straight A's. I had spent hours buried in textbooks, sacrificing sleep just to make them proud. I walked up to my mom, heart pounding in my chest, hoping, praying that maybe this time she would smile at me the way she smiled at him. "Mom," I said, holding out the paper, "I got straight A's." She barely glanced at it. "Good," she muttered, before turning away to watch Aaron's soccer practice through the kitchen window. Aaron's coach says he's got real talent, maybe even a scholarship in a few years. I stood there, frozen, the report card trembling in my fingers. It wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. It only got worse as we grew older. Aaron could break curfew, fail a test, or even crash Dad's car. He was still their pride and joy. Meanwhile, I had to be perfect just to be invisible. I worked hard, hoping that if I achieved enough, they'd finally see me. But no matter what I did, Aaron's shadow swallowed me whole. By the time I was 16, I stopped trying. What was the point? Nothing I did would ever be as important as whatever Aaron touched. They didn't care that I spent my weekends tutoring other students or that I led the debate team to nationals. All that mattered was that Aaron scored the winning goal or that his friends thought he was cool. And yet, a part of me still craved their approval. That tiny sliver of hope clung to my heart, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. When it came time for college, I poured myself into applications. I wanted to escape, to build a life where I wasn't constantly compared to someone else. I spent late nights perfecting my essays, checking every box, knowing my only chance was a scholarship because my parents made it clear they wouldn't pay for me. That was for Aaron. I got in, not just anywhere, one of the best universities in the country. I remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands, tears pricking my eyes. For the first time, I felt like I had done something undeniable, something they couldn't ignore. I ran downstairs clutching the letter. My dad was watching TV, while Mom flipped through a catalog for Aaron's prom tux. "I got in," I said, breathless. "A full scholarship. I'm going to—" "That's nice, sweetie," Mom interrupted, not even looking up. "Aaron, did you decide on the navy suit or the black one? We should schedule a fitting." My stomach dropped. I swallowed hard, hoping for something, anything. A smile, a hug, maybe even a simple congratulations. But no, I was background noise in a life that revolved around my brother. A week later, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Aaron had messed up, again. He'd been rejected from every college he applied to. I should have felt bad, but instead, there was only a cold ache in my chest when I heard Mom's voice. "We'll give him her college fund," she said quietly. "She has a scholarship anyway." I felt the blood drain from my face. My stomach twisted in a painful knot. It wasn't just indifference anymore. It was betrayal. Everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of, they handed it to him without a second thought. I wanted to scream, to burst into the room and demand to know why I wasn't worth fighting for. But instead, I swallowed the pain and made myself a promise. One day, they would regret choosing him over me. One day, I would make sure of it. And from that moment on, I stopped trying to earn their love. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, fine. But I wouldn't let them hold me back. I would succeed, not for them, not for their approval, but for myself. And when I did, they would know exactly what they lost. College became my escape, a fresh start where no one knew me as the forgotten child. I threw myself into my studies, determined to build a life that no one could take away from me. I didn't want their approval anymore. I wanted independence. I wanted freedom. And most of all, I wanted to prove to myself that I was more than the shadow they had forced me to live in. At first, it was hard. Balancing a full scholarship, a part-time job, and the constant weight of being on my own drained me in ways I never thought possible. While my classmates spent their weekends partying or going home to visit family, I stayed back, working long hours in the campus library or waitressing at a local diner. I didn't have the luxury of calling home for extra money. They had made it clear. I was on my own. I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Every time I saw my classmates getting care packages from their parents or heard them complain about their moms calling too much, a bitter ache settled in my chest. I wanted that. I wanted to be wanted. But wanting didn't change reality. I kept my head down and worked harder. I earned top grades in every class. I built relationships with professors who recognized my potential. And slowly, the ache of being unwanted turned into something else, something stronger. Anger. I wasn't angry at myself anymore. No, I was angry at them for making me feel like I wasn't worth loving, worth supporting. And that anger fueled me on the days when I felt like giving up. It pushed me through the exhaustion, through the loneliness. I wasn't going to let their rejection define me. I would succeed because they said I couldn't. By my junior year, I had secured a prestigious internship at a top financial firm, an opportunity that promised to open doors I never thought possible. I still remember walking into that sleek office for the first time, feeling a strange mix of fear and excitement. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the verge of something big, something they couldn't ignore. But even as I thrived, the memory of their betrayal lingered. I couldn't shake the image of my mother's casual indifference as she handed my future to Aaron, like it was nothing. I couldn't forget the sound of my father's voice dismissing my dreams as if they were irrelevant, and I knew, deep down, that I wanted more than success. I wanted them to regret it. That chance came sooner than I expected. It was the summer before my senior year when I got the call. I was working late at the firm when my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. My mother. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Sweetheart," she said, her tone sugary sweet, a voice she had never used with me before. "It's been so long. How are you?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. 3 years of silence, and suddenly, she wanted to play the doting mother? "I'm fine," I said coolly. "What's going on?" There was a pause, a hesitation I recognized instantly. She wanted something. "Well, it's about Aaron," she began, her voice dropping into a worried whisper. "He's had some difficulties. You know how hard things have been for him." I didn't know. I didn't care. He lost his job," she continued, her words slow and deliberate. "And well, your father and I have been helping as much as we can, but things are tight. We were wondering if you could help out a little, just for a while." The audacity of it stunned me into silence. After everything they had done, after casting me aside without a second thought, they had the nerve to ask for help? "I'm sorry," I said finally, my voice sharp. You want me to bail out the brother you chose over me? Don't be so dramatic, she snapped, her sweet tone vanishing. Family helps family. You're doing well now, aren't you? Surely you can spare something. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. The years of rejection, of being treated like I didn't matter, crashing down on me. I had sacrificed everything to get where I was. And now, when it was convenient for them, they wanted a piece of it? I'm not his backup plan, I said coldly. You made your choice. You chose him, remember? So no, I'm not helping. Before she could respond, I hung up, my hands trembling with rage. For days after, the conversation haunted me. I had thought that hearing them ask for help would feel like a victory, a sign that I had won. But instead, it just left me feeling empty. I realized then that no amount of success would fill the void they had left in me. I had spent years chasing their approval, but it was a battle I could never win. They didn't see me as a person with dreams and worth. They saw me as a backup plan, a convenient solution to their problems, and I was done playing that role. From that moment forward, I made a promise to myself. I would build a life so extraordinary that they would have no choice but to see what they lost. But they wouldn't be part of it. Not anymore. The days after my mother's call left a bitter taste in my mouth. I thought cutting the conversation short would bring me peace, a sense of justice, maybe. But it didn't. The emptiness lingered like a wound that refused to heal. I buried myself deeper into my work, pouring every ounce of energy into my internship, determined to succeed on my own terms. I stayed late at the office most nights, taking on extra projects no one else wanted. My dedication didn't go unnoticed. By the end of the summer, the senior manager, Mr. Caldwell, called me into his office. He was an intimidating man, stern, analytical, and not easily impressed. I sat across from him, heart pounding, as he leafed through my work portfolio. "You've done remarkable work here, Elena," he said, looking up at me with a rare smile. "We don't usually offer positions to undergraduates, but I'm making an exception. If you want it, there's a permanent position here for you after graduation." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. I had dreamed of this moment, worked myself to exhaustion for it, and now it was mine. But beneath the excitement, a flicker of something darker stirred. I had done this without my family. I had earned this alone, while they had written me off. "Thank you," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. "I won't let you down." I should have been overjoyed. My hard work had paid off. But that night, as I walked back to my tiny apartment, the ache returned. I didn't want my family's approval anymore, but part of me still wanted them to see me, to understand that I had never needed them to succeed, and that they had lost someone irreplaceable. Weeks turned into months. My senior year flew by in a blur of deadlines, late nights, and coffee-fueled study sessions. I stayed out of contact with my family, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. The weight of their judgment no longer held me down. I was building a future on my own terms, until, one day, they came crashing back into my life. It was a cold winter evening when I received the second call, this time from my father. The sound of his voice sent a chill down my spine. He hadn't called me in years, not even when I had won academic awards or landed my prestigious internship. Yet here he was, as if nothing had happened. "Elena," he said, his voice unusually soft. "It's your mother." I stiffened. "What about her?" "She's sick," he admitted, a sigh heavy in his voice. "It's serious. We thought you should know." For a brief second, my heart faltered. Despite everything, a part of me still cared. This was the woman who had given birth to me, the woman I had once tried so desperately to please. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, masking my emotions. "She wants to see you," he continued, as if it were a simple request. "She misses you." I almost laughed at the irony. She had spent my entire life pushing me aside, ignoring me while showering Aaron with love. And now, when she was at her weakest, she wanted me back? "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "Elena," he said, his tone turning colder, more familiar. "She's still your mother." The old guilt tried to creep in, the part of me that had always wanted to be a dutiful daughter. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had built a life without them, and I wasn't about to let them pull me back. "I can't," I said simply. "I hope she gets better." I hung up before he could say another word. My hands trembled, and my heart pounded in my chest. I expected to feel guilt, but all I felt was relief. For once I had put myself first. Still, their sudden reappearance left me uneasy, and that unease grew when, a week later, I received an email from Aaron. The subject line was simple: "I need your help." I stared at the screen, torn between curiosity and resentment. Finally, I opened it. "Elena, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm out of options. Things have been rough. I lost my job last year, and I've been struggling to find work. Mom's medical bills are piling up, and Dad can't handle it alone. I wouldn't ask if I had another choice, but we need help. Please." The nerve of him. After everything he had taken, my college fund, my parents' love, my place in the family, he still thought I owed him something. I closed my laptop without replying. The old me would have agonized over the decision, torn between my anger and the hope of finally being accepted. But the woman I had become knew better. They had made their choices, and now they were facing the consequences. Still, I wasn't finished yet. For years I had swallowed my pain while they lived comfortably, never once acknowledging the damage they had done. It was time to show them what it felt like to be overlooked and powerless. A plan began to take shape. Using the contacts I had built at my job, I quietly looked into Aaron's failed business ventures. It didn't take long to find the truth. He had lost his job due to negligence, and worse, he was deep in debt from a series of bad investments. My father wasn't doing much better. With my mother's medical bills draining their savings, they were close to losing the house, the same house where they had once made me feel like a stranger. It would have been easy to step in and help. A single call from me could have solved their problems. But why should I? Instead, I made a different call. I reached out to one of my firm's property investment clients, a man always on the lookout for undervalued homes. Within weeks, their house was under scrutiny for foreclosure. When the foreclosure notice arrived at their door, my father called me again, this time with desperation in his voice. "They're taking the house, Elena," he said, his facade of authority cracking. "Please, we need you." For a moment, I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel the emptiness I had felt for years. "You made it clear a long time ago that I didn't matter," I said quietly. "Now I'm just returning the favor." I ended the call, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over me. I didn't need their love anymore. I didn't need their approval. I had found my worth on my own, and they would never take that from me again. Let them regret their choices. I was finally free. The days after my father's desperate call were quieter than I expected. I thought they might try again, another phone call, maybe a message begging for help. But nothing came. It was as if, After years of silence, we had returned to the same place. Except this time, I was the one with the power, and they were the ones drowning. A part of me should have felt guilt. My mother was sick, my father was losing everything, and Aaron, my perfect golden brother, was falling apart. But I didn't feel sorry for them. Not after the years I spent invisible in that house, yearning for love they would never give me. All those nights I lay awake wondering what I had done wrong. Why I wasn't enough for them. Now, they were learning what it felt like to be left behind, and I didn't mind watching. Still, my curiosity got the better of me. One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself scrolling through Aaron's social media. He had always been the family's pride, the charming, successful son with a bright future. But lately, his posts told a different story. The expensive vacations and flashy cars had disappeared. In their place were vague messages about hard times and trusting the process. His profile, once filled with smiling pictures of him and my parents, was strangely empty of family photos. I couldn't resist digging deeper. A few discreet searches through my firm's financial databases gave me a clearer picture. Aaron's debts were worse than I thought. He had defaulted on a personal loan, and his credit was in shambles. My parents had already mortgaged the house once to bail him out, and now that I had pulled the right strings, the foreclosure was moving fast. There wasn't much time left before they would lose everything. I should have felt satisfied. This was what I wanted, wasn't it? For them to know what it felt like to be abandoned, to lose everything they held dear. But late at night, when the world grew quiet, an unease settled in my chest. Why did it still feel like I was waiting for something? A week later, I got my answer. I was at the office, finishing a report, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. As soon as I opened the message, my breath caught in my throat. I know what you did, and you'll pay for it. For a moment, the world around me blurred. My hands trembled slightly as I reread the message, a chill creeping down my spine. It had to be Aaron. Who else would know? Who else would care enough to threaten me? But why now? And what did he think he could do? I locked my phone and tried to shake the feeling off, but it lingered, an itch I couldn't scratch. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Could Aaron really hurt me? Or was this just another desperate attempt to drag me back into their mess? The next day, I found my answer. When I arrived at work, my boss, Mr. Caldwell, was waiting. His usual stern expression seemed colder than usual as he handed me a printed email. I scanned it quickly, and my blood turned to ice. It was an anonymous tip accusing me of corporate espionage. The email claimed I had used confidential company information to manipulate a foreclosure. My parents' foreclosure. My stomach twisted as I realized how much trouble I could be in. Even though I had been careful, never leaving a direct trail, the accusation alone could destroy my career, and I knew exactly who was behind it. Aaron. I spent the day on edge, trying to focus on my work while the accusation hung over me like a storm cloud. Mr. Caldwell hadn't said much after showing me the email, but his silence was worse than any reprimand. I couldn't afford to lose this job, not after everything I had sacrificed. By the time I got home, my nerves were frayed. I paced my apartment, replaying every step I had taken. Aaron was desperate, but he wasn't smart enough to ruin me. At least, that's what I told myself. But just as I started to calm down, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. Elena? Aaron's voice was cold, venomous. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? I clenched my jaw. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, he spat. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? Just because you walked away. But guess what? You can't ruin my life without consequences. I wanted to laugh at the audacity. Ruin your life? You did that all by yourself, Erin. You've always been a bitter little girl, he sneered. Jealous, pathetic. But now you're going to pay. A cold rage burned through me. After everything he had taken, after years of being nothing in their eyes, he still had the nerve to call me bitter? I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You and Mom and Dad, you all made your choice, and now you're paying the price. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. We'll see who pays the price, Elena. He hung up before I could respond, leaving me trembling in the silence. For a moment, I wanted to break down. I had worked so hard to build my life, to escape them. And now, Erin was threatening to destroy everything I had fought for. But then another thought cut through my fear. One sharp and clear. I wasn't that powerless girl anymore. I had played their game, and I had won. And if Erin wanted a war, I was ready. I spent the next few days gathering every piece of leverage I had. I dug deeper into Erin's financial mess, found the shady business deals he had hidden, even from our parents. I uncovered emails proving he had misrepresented assets during his last job, enough to destroy any chance he had of rebuilding his career. And when I was finished, I sent it all anonymously to his creditors. By the time the dust settled, Erin was ruined. The last I heard, he had moved back home, jobless, drowning in debt, and completely powerless. My parents had lost the house, downsizing to a cramped apartment where the golden son now lived off their dwindling savings. And me? I was free. When I walked into Mr. Caldwell's office the following week, he didn't mention the accusation. The anonymous tip had led nowhere. I had been too careful. And in its place, he handed me a promotion offer. I accepted it with a smile. As I left the office that day, the winter air felt crisp and clean. For the first time in my life, I was truly free of them. They had chosen Erin over me, and now they were living with the consequences. And I had everything I had ever wanted, and they could never touch me again. Weeks passed, but the tension Erin had stirred within me refused to fade. Even though I had successfully dismantled his life and blocked his attempt to ruin mine, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in my chest. I had won the battle, but something inside me knew the war wasn't over. One evening, as I settled into my apartment with a glass of wine, I received an email that made my heart stop. It was from a legal firm, one I recognized as the one my father had used in the past. The subject line read, "Estate matters, urgent review required." My pulse quickened as I opened the email. The message was short and formal, requesting my presence at a meeting regarding a revised family will. I laughed bitterly to myself. For years, I wasn't even considered part of the family when it came to anything important. Why were they calling me now? A part of me wanted to delete the email and move on, to let them rot in the mess they created. But curiosity gnawed at me. Why would they want me there? And what had changed? 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a sleek, marble-lined conference room. I had dressed carefully, sharp, elegant, and utterly composed. If they expected to find a broken, desperate daughter, they would be disappointed. When the door opened, my father walked in first. He looked older, wearier, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. My mother followed, her once perfectly coiffed hair limp, her expression hollow. But it was Aaron who caught my attention. He looked destroyed. The confident, arrogant brother I had known was gone. His eyes were sunken, dark circles beneath them. His clothes, once designer, looked worn and ill-fitted. Whatever pride he had left had been stripped away. Good. They barely acknowledged me as they took their seats. I leaned back in my chair, cool and detached, while the lawyer began to speak. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, he started, have requested this meeting to discuss an amendment to their will. Given the family's recent financial distress, changes must be made. I arched a brow but remained silent. My father cleared his throat, his voice rough when he finally spoke. We're losing everything, he admitted, his pride clearly shattered. The house is gone. Aaron, he's not in a position to support us. A sharp satisfaction curled in my stomach. They had always believed Aaron would be their savior, their golden boy. Now he was nothing but a burden, and they had no one else left. We want to make things right, my mother added quietly, her gaze avoiding mine. You're our daughter too, Elena. I nearly laughed out loud at the sudden attempt at reconciliation. Where was this sentiment when I was growing up, when I was left to feel like a stranger in my own home? Why now? I asked, my voice calm but cutting. You made it clear where I stood years ago. So, why am I suddenly important? Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair, and I caught the faint clench of his jaw. My father hesitated before answering, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Because they had no one else. We were wrong, he admitted, though the words seemed to burn his throat. You've built a life for yourself. You're stable. And we need help. There it was. The truth laid bare. It wasn't love that brought them here. It was desperation. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. You chose him over me, I said softly. Again and again. And now that he's failed you, you want me to clean up the mess? It's not like that, my mother began, but I cut her off. It's exactly like that. I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Do you know what it felt like? To be invisible? To watch you shower him with love and attention while I was left in the shadows? My voice trembled despite my effort to hold steady. For so long, I had bottled that pain. But now, sitting across from the people who had caused it, the weight of it pressed down on me. You're right, I continued. I did build a life for myself. Without your help. Without your love. And now you want me back. Not because you care, but because you have nothing left. My mother's face crumpled with tears, but I felt no pity. Not after years of silence. Not after being discarded like I never mattered. The lawyer shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the raw tension in the room. If you agree to assist your parents, he said smoothly, you would be the primary beneficiary of their remaining estate. A cold laugh escaped me. What estate? I gestured around the sterile conference room. You've lost everything. There's nothing left to inherit. Silence stretched between us. Aaron's knuckles whitened as he gripped the chair's armrests, his pride clearly wounded. For all his bravado, he couldn't escape the reality. He had failed them, and I had won. I don't want your money, I said finally, rising from my seat. And I don't need your apology. I needed it years ago, but not anymore. My father opened his mouth as if to protest, but I held up a hand. You made your choice, I said, my voice unwavering. Now I'm making mine. I turned toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. For so many years, I had wanted their approval to be enough for them. But as I walked away, I realized something powerful. I no longer needed it. They could live with the consequences of their choices. I had finally freed myself from the chains they had wrapped around me since childhood. The next day, I officially changed my phone number. I blocked them from every avenue they could use to reach me. And for the first time in years, I felt truly liberated. Aaron would never recover his golden boy status. My parents would live in the shadow of their mistakes. And me? I would thrive without them. The final thread binding me to my past had snapped, and in its place was a future they could no longer touch. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the one who walked away and never looked back. Months passed, and the silence from my parents and Aaron became deafening. They didn't reach out again, not that they could after I cut off every possible connection. For years, I had craved their love and approval, but now I realized how much lighter life felt without the constant weight of their judgment. I no longer flinched at the sound of my phone or dreaded family holidays. I was free. I poured myself into my work, growing my business beyond anything I had imagined. My company, once a simple side hustle born from necessity, was now thriving, more successful than anything Aaron had ever touched. I had partnerships with major brands, a loyal customer base, and a growing team that respected and valued me. And yet, there were still nights when old wounds itched. Memories I thought I had buried resurfaced when the world grew quiet. Like the time I stayed up late helping Aaron with his college essays, while my parents praised him for being so responsible. Or the Christmas when they forgot to buy me a gift because they were too busy planning Aaron's ski trip with his friends. No matter how much I tried to move forward, those scars lingered. But I refused to let them define me. One day, while reviewing a new client proposal, my assistant Lila knocked gently on my office door. "Elena, there's someone here to see you," she said, a frown creasing her brow. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I sighed, already half annoyed. "Who is it?" She hesitated. "It's Aaron." My entire body tensed at the sound of his name. I hadn't seen him since that cold, final meeting at the lawyer's office. Part of me wanted to send him away, but curiosity, and perhaps a lingering thread of something I didn't want to name, made me nod. "Send him in," I said, keeping my voice neutral. A minute later, Aaron stepped through the door. He looked even worse than the last time I saw him. His once perfect hair was unkempt, his suit wrinkled and far from the tailored perfection he used to wear. But it was his eyes that struck me. Hollow, desperate, nothing like the arrogant brother I had grown up with. "Elena," he started, his voice rough. "I didn't know if you'd see me." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "What do you want, Aaron?" He swallowed hard, glancing around my sleek office. I could see the envy flicker across his face. I had everything he had lost, and more. "I messed up," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And Mom and Dad, they're not doing well." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Not my problem," I said coolly. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. For once, he seemed to realize I wasn't someone he could manipulate. "I know I don't deserve your help," he said, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his failures. "But they're sick. Dad's heart is failing, and Mom, she can barely hold herself together. I can't handle it on my own." I felt a pang in my chest, but I pushed it aside. "Why should I care?" I asked. "They never cared when I needed them." "I know," he said quickly. I know how badly they treated you, how badly I treated you. I was selfish and entitled. I never thought you'd succeed without them. His words hung heavy in the air. I wanted to feel triumphant, to relish his regret. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. I don't owe them anything, I said firmly, and I don't owe you either. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected my rejection. You're right, he murmured, but I had to try. For them. He turned to leave, but something in his defeated posture stopped me. Despite everything, he was still my brother, and as much as I wanted to pretend I didn't care, the truth was more complicated. Wait, I said, my voice softer than I intended. How bad is it? Aaron hesitated before turning back around. Dad's medical bills are piling up. They had to sell everything else, and I can barely keep my head above water. They're broken, Elena. And I know it's my fault. For a long moment, I said nothing. I could feel the weight of years of pain, resentment, and longing pressing against my ribs. A part of me wanted to walk away, to let them suffer the consequences of their choices. But another part, the one that had always craved love and acceptance, hesitated. I wasn't doing this for them, not after everything they had done. But maybe, just maybe, I could do it for myself, to prove that I was better than the way they had treated me. I'll think about it, I said finally, my tone guarded. Aaron's shoulders sagged in relief. Thank you, he whispered, even if you decide not to help. Thank you for hearing me out. When he left, I sat there in silence, my thoughts tangled in a web of anger, pity, and something dangerously close to hope. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, my mind replaying every moment I had been cast aside. But mixed in with those memories were flashes of something else, of the little girl who had only ever wanted to be loved. By morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going back to being their forgotten daughter, but I wouldn't let their mistakes turn me into someone bitter and heartless either. The next day, I transferred enough money to cover my father's medical bills, anonymously. I didn't need their gratitude, and I didn't want their apologies. I just wanted to close this chapter once and for all. I knew they might never change. I knew Aaron might still be the same insecure, selfish man he always was. But I was done carrying their burden. By helping them without letting them back into my life, I was finally free. And freedom, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Weeks passed after I sent the anonymous payment to cover my father's medical bills. I expected nothing in return, no call, no message, no apology. And I was fine with that. I didn't do it for their gratitude. I did it to release myself from the weight of their neglect. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried since childhood had finally been lifted. My business continued to thrive, expanding into new markets and breaking records. I was no longer the invisible daughter begging for love. I was a woman who had built herself from the ground up. But despite my success, there was still a small, unyielding ache in my chest. Not for my parents or Aaron, but for the version of myself that had once believed their love would make me whole. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find an envelope on my doorstep. It was unmarked. No return address, no indication of who sent it. My heart pounded as I picked it up, a part of me already knowing who it was from. I carried the envelope inside, hesitating before opening it. Did I even want to know what they had to say? But curiosity won over, as it always did. I slid my fingers under the flap and pulled out a letter. The handwriting was shaky, as if written by someone whose hands had lost their strength. My mother's handwriting. "Elena," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, or if you even care to read this, but I need to say it anyway." The words blurred slightly as I blinked away the sting of tears. I forced myself to keep reading. "We were wrong. About everything. We treated you like you didn't matter, and I wish I could go back and undo it all. You were always the strong one, stronger than we ever gave you credit for. When your father fell ill and the bills piled up, I thought we'd lose everything. I didn't know how we would survive. But then the hospital called to tell us the bills were paid. We knew it was you." I exhaled sharply, my hands trembling as I turned the page. "I don't deserve your kindness. Neither does your father. And as for Aaron, he's broken in ways I can't fix. We failed him too, though differently. I see that now. But what haunts me the most is how we failed you. I can't ask for forgiveness. I wouldn't blame you if you never spoke to us again. But I want you to know this. I am proud of you, even if I never said it. I was too blinded by my own expectations to see the incredible woman you became. I see it now. I only wish I had seen it sooner." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I had waited my whole life to hear those words, to be acknowledged, to be seen. And now that they had come, I wasn't sure what to do with them. The letter ended with a simple, heartbreaking line. "If you ever find it in your heart to give us another chance, we'll be here. But if not, we'll still be grateful for what you did. More than words can say." I sat in silence for a long time after finishing the letter, my emotions a tangled mess. Part of me wanted to tear it apart, to throw it into the fire and burn every reminder of the pain they had caused. But another part, the part that had always longed for their love, held on to those words as if they were a lifeline. For days, I wrestled with the decision. Did they deserve a second chance? Could I risk letting them back into my life and reopening old wounds? Or was it better to leave the past where it belonged and move forward without them? In the end, I chose a path that was mine alone. I didn't call, I didn't visit, but I wrote back. My letter was simple and honest. I told them I had built a life for myself, a life they had no part in, but one I was proud of. I thanked them for their letter, for acknowledging the pain they caused, but I also made it clear that I wasn't ready to reopen that door. Maybe one day I would be, maybe not, and that was okay. I mailed the letter without a return address. It wasn't an invitation, it was closure. My life no longer revolved around waiting for their love. I had learned to love myself, and that was more powerful than anything they could ever give me. Months turned into a year, and I didn't hear from them again. But I didn't need to. The chapter of my life where I was the forgotten child, the one who never felt good enough, was over. I surrounded myself with people who valued me, who loved me for who I was. My business reached new heights, but more importantly, I found peace. Real, lasting peace. And in that peace, I discovered something profound. The best revenge isn't anger or spite. It's happiness. It's freedom. And it's knowing that no matter who tries to tear you down, you have the power to rise above it. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the woman who walked away and never looked back.